Are you confident it will be?
I think it's really important that this video be made public. It's not lost on anyone, of course, that the interpretation of the video, which, 6 or 7 of us had an opportunity to see last week, broke down precisely on party lines. And so this is an instance in which I think the American public needs to judge for itself. I know how the public is going to react because I felt my own reaction. I've spent years looking at videos of lethal action taken, often in the terrorism context. And this video was profoundly shaken. And I think it's important for Americans to see it because, look, there's a certain amount of sympathy out there for going after drug runners. But I think it's really important that people see what it looks like when the full force of the United States military is turned on 2 guys who are clinging to a piece of wood and about to go under, just so that they have sort of a visceral feel for what it is that we're doing.
Why did it shake you so much? What specifically was bothering you?
Well, and this is sort of the distinction, and there's a lot to unpack here about whether this is an authorized military action, which it is not, and right on down to whether these were legitimate targets, and they were not. But let me go back to some of the reviews I've done of other lethal action. Oftentimes when the Department of Defense takes a strike against a terrorist in Yemen or Pakistan or wherever, you watch a video of guys fully armed with AK-47s and sidearms and bombs and you name it, and they're on their way to do something terrible. And in this instance, you may have had bad guys. I have no doubt that these guys were involved in the running of drugs. Now, whether they were running it to the United States or Europe is yet another question. But in that instance, these guys were about to die. Had the United States just walked away, their little piece of wood would have gone under the waves. And as many times as Tom Cotton may say that it doesn't matter what they were doing, it matters essentially what they were doing, because under the law, and if you've spent 15 minutes in law school, you know this, under the law, if someone has been struck and continues to engage in hostilities, points a gun at you, has a gun, they may be a legitimate target. But if they are outside of combat, they are not. And attacking them is a violation of the laws of war. And these guys, and this is why the American people need to see this video, these guys were barely alive, much less engaging in hostilities.
Well, the DoD Law of War manual seems to hinge a lot of that on whether the person is wholly disabled from fighting. And that is where the Secretary of Defense has used language saying they're about to return to the fight. I'm going to play for you what Secretary Hegseth said at the Reagan Forum Saturday. He described what was happening with these 4 strikes on the alleged drug-running boat.
A couple hours later, I was told, hey, there had to be a reattack because there were a couple folks that could still be in the fight, access to radios, there was a link-up point of another potential boat, drugs were still there, they were actively interacting with them, had to take that reattack. I said, Roger, sounds good.
Does what Hegseth said match what Admiral Bradley told you?
Well, there was a lot of lack of clarity over exactly what Pete Hegseth's role here was. But Pete Hegseth has no credibility on this matter, right? Remember, a week after this strike, there was a briefing for Congress. Why was a follow-up strike taken? The answer then, in the first week of September, was a follow-up strike was taken because we needed to clear the wreckage so that there wasn't a danger to navigation. That was explanation number 1. Explanation number 2, right before we watched the video, was that they might have had a radio and they might have been radioing a boat and they might have been trying to recover the cocaine. And then when you actually watch the video, you realize they don't have a radio. They're barely hanging on and not slipping beneath the waves. Then we get this thing of how they're trying to right the boat. This was about a 40-foot boat that had just been hit with a massive piece of munitions. The conflagration probably destroyed everything in that boat, but maybe they might have swum under, gotten a radio, probably waterlogged, and radioed a boat that we're not even sure was there. So what we've had is a series of shifting explanations. And including the fog of war, right? That Hegseth said, well, they took the second strike because of the fog of war. There was no fog. The military watched this boat very carefully, or I shouldn't even say boat. They watched the wreckage of the boat very carefully for a long period of time before they took the second strike. So look, what Pete Hegseth says about this strike has zero credibility at this point.
Do you have confidence in Admiral Bradley?
Admiral Bradley, this was my first meeting with him. Anyone who has ever worked with Admiral Bradley will tell you that he has a storied career and that he is a man of deep, deep integrity. And frankly, I have no reason to doubt that. What it raises is what happens when an apparently good man like Admiral Bradley is placed in a context where he knows that if he countermands an order that he is perhaps uncomfortable with, it is very likely that he will be fired. When he works for a guy, Pete Hegseth, who wrote a book about how we shouldn't observe the laws of war, about how we need to be lethal and so. It's interesting to think about how a good man in that context maybe does something that if he weren't in that context, he might not do.